and welcome to tonight's edition of Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on Facebook, live on Instagram as well, and then on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1. Tonight, we're talking about a very important issue which has to do with the direction and the fate of our nation when the finance minister reads the budget, God willing, tomorrow in Parliament. It's a constitutional responsibility of the finance minister to tell Ghanaians the direction the government intends to go in terms of policy, in terms of the resuscitation of the economy, especially when we all see the ravaging effects of COVID-19 on our economy. And so that's our focus. We'll try to preempt, we'll try to forecast the direction the finance minister is likely to go. I'm sure you do have your own expectations as to what the finance minister should say when he presents the budget. Last Monday, we had a conversation on the Happy Morning Show, and we tried to sample views of Ghanaians as to what direction they would expect the finance minister to go. Interestingly, majority of the people who called in to share their views with us were indifferent to what the finance minister might say. Some were concerned about the hike in fuel prices. Some were concerned about the hike in, the prices of commodities on our shelves or in the markets when you go there. But there are things to be discussed. Would the finance minister go in the direction of fiscal consolidation, or would he go on the path of spending to resuscitate and rejuvenate the economy? Many economists would say in order for the economy to bounce back, there should be the pumping of money into the system, and so the government must spend. But has the government got the fiscal space to spend, considering that our debt portfolio is very high at the moment, that our debt to GDP equally is very high? From the IMF's Article 4 review they made of Ghana, we need to tread cautiously when it comes to our debt portfolio. Just this morning, I was reading a piece on a platform where there's a report of the potential for Ghana to join the HIPC group again. Would we go there? Now, we are looking at a situation where, as we speak now, inflation rate, double digit, 10.6, I believe. As we speak now, if you check the exchange rate, the dollar to the cedi is around 6.15. If you check fuel prices, 6.9. There have been so many agitations. Drivers virtually nearly put down their tools not to drive until they decided to rescind their decision, calling on the government to remove the tax component on the fuel products we buy at the various pumps. There are so many issues to look at. Food prices that are going up, and also where government intends to generate revenue to embark on its developmental agenda. If we are to cast our minds back, the government spoke about some 100 billion Ghana Care fund that it intends to use to bolster the economy. We have also been told about the Development Bank, which through the partnership with the EIB, we have some 170 million euros to also utilize. As we speak now, what's the state of affairs when it comes to that bank? So much to discuss tonight as to our expectations of the finance minister as he presents the budget. Would there be the introduction of new taxes, or the finance minister would be smart enough to introduce taxes in certain areas, with many forecasting that there's a possibility for the government to target the corporate world? Are they ready to shoulder the burden? And would they transfer that burden to us as consumers of their various products and services? That's our focus tonight on Fact Sheet. I encourage you to stay with us. My name is Samuel Ishen. My guest is here with me. We'll take a short breather. When we come back, I'll introduce you to him. Hey, welcome back to Fact Sheets live on ETV, live on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The handle is ETV Ghana or Happy 989 FM. Also live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1 in Bogatanga and Tamale, respectively. Your thoughts, your views, very much welcome, even as we discuss the matter of the 2022 budget to be presented, God willing, tomorrow by the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta. My guest tonight to help me try to understand the direction the Finance Minister is likely to go in terms of revenue generation, in terms of expenditure, in terms of the sources, the direction we must go, whether we are looking internally or we are looking externally. Do we have that space to borrow? bearing in mind that as we speak now, our debt to GDP portfolio is around somewhere around 77.1.2 thereabout. And so we must be careful so we don't fall within the range of the heavily indebted poor countries where we don't want to go, to have a new IMF structured program for us. We just came out of one somewhere around 2018, 2019 thereabout. And so we are careful as to what we do so as not to position ourselves for that. And so I encourage you to share your thoughts, your views with us, even as we try to understand the constraints and the possibilities that are available for the Finance Minister, God willing, tomorrow. My guest tonight is Mr. Emmanuel Amwa Dakwa, who is an economist and partner with CKAAD Global, and he will join me to share his thoughts with us on this matter. Mr. Dakwa, good evening.
Thank you very much.
It's good to have you.
Sammy.
Good to have you. We have been speaking on the morning show and never really met personally, but for tonight.
Yeah, I know, right?
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you too, my brother. So let's start the conversation by taking a general view as to how the economy has performed so far. Okay. With COVID-19, its impact it's had on us. Have we done much in terms of resuscitating the economy?
Thank you very much. A very good evening to our viewers. Ghana, like many countries, you know, we faced with COVID-19, and the pandemic has exacerbated, you know, the structural challenges that we were facing, i.e. the low mobilization of revenue and then the increase in expenditure. And so Ghana, like in other countries, have faced with the challenge of having high expenditure whilst revenue is not performing. And so government had to take steps to, you know, revitalize the economy. And in 2020, our projections, based on the performance of the economy in 2019, we had to miss a lot of the targets. And so it was very important that government put in place, you know, policies to revitalize the economy. In terms of the fiscal side, you see that there was a, you know, government had to increase, or maybe freebies, as we call it. We had free electricity, water, and then there was also what we call the cap bus. An initial investment was about 750 million Ghana cedis, which was given to the SME sector. In Ghana, the business structure, we have a lot of the, you know, businesses into small, micro, and medium enterprises. And as part of these measures, it was supposed to revitalize the economy. On the monetary policy side, government had to, you know, through the central bank, had to put a cap or reduce the primary reserve requirement for banks so that we'll be able to free a lot of liquidity into the economy. The central bank has also to also tread cautiously in you know, regulating the monetary policy rate. And so these are some of the things that in terms of the fiscal side and in terms of the monetary policy, government had to do for us to be able to resuscitate the economy. You know, COVID, I would say, is not the only challenge that Ghana has. You know, before COVID hit, we had structural problems, i.e. revenue has not been performing as expected. At the same time, expenditure has been going up. And so for many years now, you see that we are running budget deficits, and so which is feeding into the public debt stock. As I speak to you now, Ghana's debt stock in terms of nominal values is in excess of 336 billion Ghana cedis, as compared to GDP above 77% to GDP. So these are the challenges we have been confronted with. So government is trying to revitalize and also bring the economy back to track for us to achieve the medium-term prospects.
It's interesting, these numbers you threw at us as economists. You know, you talk about debt to GDP ratio being around 77 points, let's say 1 or 2, the debt stock and all of that. How does it necessarily translate into the normal lives of the Ghanaian?
Very good question. In analyzing the health of any economy, you would want to start from the macroeconomic indicators. And it's like going to the hospital and you are telling the doctor to check your vitals. They will check your BP, they will check your sugar or whatever. That is how we also start the analysis of the economy. in as much as the macroeconomic indicators are important, it is very important for us to focus on the impact on the macroeconomic indicators on the ordinary Ghanaians. Because if you throw at me that Ghana's economy has grown by 8% and our public debt is at this figure, what does it mean to the ordinary Ghanaian? And so I believe that the conversation should not, stay at the macro level, but at the micro level and how it impacts the ordinary Ghanaian. I give an example. We will say that monetary policy rate has, has stayed at 13.5%. What is the impact of monetary policy rate on the cost of credit on the market? And that is where the analysis should be able to lead us, so that we know that once the monetary policy rate is going down, what is its impact on the lending rate for businesses and also for individuals, for us to have a very stable economy. So the conversation, I admit that it shouldn't stay at the macro level, but how it impacts ordinary Ghanaians. That is why policies are very important to translate government's agenda and its impact on the ordinary Ghanaians.
All right, so there's been the recent conversation about unemployment in the country. Recently, when the forces decided to sell their forms and recruit, it raised the question about the number of people who are unemployed, and the finance minister's own admission that government's ability to absorb people into the mainstream public sector is choked, and so it's impossible, and so people must look at the direction of entrepreneurship. So then I asked the simple question that where should government be looking at going in terms of this budget? Should it be looking at the direction of fiscal consolidation? Should it be looking in the direction of spending more? Where should government be looking at?
We should tread cautiously at this moment, because our projection for last year, we grew at 0.4, even less than 1% actually. At the time, we had projected to grow about 6%. And so we are not out of the woods yet. This year, we are estimating to grow like GDP growth of 5.1%. And so government has to tread cautiously in terms of the policy decisions to go for austerity or to spend. Either ways have advantages and disadvantages. And let me start from the austerity. We have gone through COVID, and it has led to shortfall in revenue, not only for government, but also for corporations and for individuals. Disposable income of individuals have also gone down because of COVID and its impact on the ordinary Ghanaians. On the other hand, if you want to go to spend, you ask yourself, do we have the fiscal space? As I speak to you now, for government's target for 2021, we envisage to raise a revenue of about 72 billion Ghana cedis. At the same time, expenditure we project to spend 113 billion. Right there, we see a deficit of about 41, 42 billion Ghana cedis. And how are we going to finance it? And so government does not have that, fiscal space to go about spending. And in the 2021 mid-year budget review, for the first half of the year, government had projected to raise about 32 billion Ghana cedis. But at the end of June, we were able to raise about 28 billion. On the same, on the other hand, expenditure, we envisaged to spend about 55 billion, but we spent 50 billion. And that was good, because once revenues are not performing, you don't have to spend more, because you balloon your deficit, which will translate into the public debt figures we are having. And so either ways, whether to go through austerity or to go through spending, there are pros and there are cons, and government should be mindful of the policy decisions they will choose.
Let me read a bit of the IMF's report on Ghana for 2021 as to the state of affairs of our economy, which is the Article 4. And in talking about the public debt management forecasting, they say that the public debt grew from 23% of GDP in 2007, the year of the first Eurobond issuance, to 79% of GDP in 2020, pushing gross financing needs above 25% of GDP, and debt service, including amortization, above 129% of revenues.
Yeah.
The adverse debt dynamics were driven by large and persistent government deficits, including financial and energy sector costs, and rising interest costs relative to economic growth. Now, it goes on to analyze the debt sustainability as it stands now.
Sure.
And it says that the debt sustainability analysis shows that Ghana remains at high risk of external and overall debt distress under the baseline, even though public debt is assessed as sustainable going forward. Now, this is where it's interesting and critical. They say that the 2021 budget financing strategy relies heavily on the domestic market, which creates risks. So, if, for instance, the finance minister decides to look internally, where would they be looking at? Considering that if you look at the budget, the performing industries or sectors, you realize agric has been doing tremendously well, followed by the service sector.
Well, it's in services, manufacturing, and agric.
Yes.
Unfortunately, because as a lower middle income country and as a developing country, economics of transition, and so you start from an agrarian economy, you move to manufacturing, and then you come to services. But what we are seeing in Ghana, per the data in the past decade, is that our economy is mimicking a service economy, but we are not a service economy. And that is where the challenge is. If you look at sectorial contribution to GDP, services is leading, followed by manufacturing, and then agric. But if you look at the sectors that have the growth potential in terms of delivering growth for the ordinary Ghanaians and lifting many people from poverty, it is agric and manufacturing. The services sector, unfortunately, is not owned by Ghanaians. Look at banking, look at insurance, look at telecommunications. Participation of locals is not that predominant as compared to the other two sectors. And that is why, for me, if any policy should be introduced in 2022, it should be geared towards how we will grow the real sectors of the economy, specifically agric and manufacturing, which has the potential to generate a lot of revenue for the ordinary Ghanaians and also lift a lot of people out of poverty.
So let's focus a little bit on agric and manufacturing. Because we're talking about 1D, 1F, which feeds into industrialization and therefore, let's say, manufacturing. I'm looking at the banking sector now. With the monetary policy rate consistently reducing, I think somewhere around 13.5 now.
13.5, yeah.
If it's around 13.5 now and it's not translating into the interest rates that businessmen pay at the banks, can we have enough coming from these sectors to propel us?
Great. The question therefore is, why are banks not responding to the downward trend of monetary policy rates? And they will tell you a couple of reasons. Number one being non-performing loans. But I feel that it's time we have to ask the difficult questions to the banks. If you are telling me that non-performing loans are high, which sectors are we talking about? Is it government non-performing? Is it corporate? Is it individuals? Once we're able to settle on such an analysis, then we'll be able to see how best we help banks reduce their non-performing loans. I believe that the reason given that because of non-performing loans, interest rates cannot go down, I think, we have to, revisit that reason again. Because for me, if you look at all the indicators, after the banking sector cleanup, the banking sector is doing very well. They are posting a lot of huge profit. But let's look at it, their contribution to the real sector. Are they able to lend to us? Average lending rate, as I speak to you, is around 20%. But monetary policy rate is around 13.5%. And even in the past 2 years, we have what we call the Ghana reference rate. And that Ghana reference rate encapsulate your monetary policy rate, the treasury bill rate, and the other market rates to compute the level of lending or interest that we charge on loans. But in all of these, the variables are going down, but still lending rate is not going down as expected. And that is why, for me, the simple reason that NPLs are high, it should not be accepted. But let's look at how best we assist the banks to deal with high NPLs so that interest rates will come down.
Now, the point
and also,
about...
let me also add to that point. And also, lending rates are not coming down as expected because government is also on the market borrowing.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so if you look at the domestic debt component of our total, debt is huge. And so government is there competing with the private sector, with individuals for loans. And so they are not able to lend to as expected. And then in terms of the rate they charge on those loans to individuals like you and I and corporations.
If you look at our debt stock, one of the contributing factors to where the figure is now has to do with how much we spend to do the banking sector cleanup.
Yeah.
And it impacted heavily on it.
Yeah.
And so one would have expected that after such an exercise where we were told that as a result of that exercise, the banking sector is being strengthened, there is confidence in the banking sector now because now customers and clients have confidence in the ability of the banks to, meet their needs.
Yeah.
And yet we still are having this conversation. Then it begs the question, what then was the relevance of that activity?
Yeah, I get it. But I believe that it's about time we ask the difficult questions. That banks, we should be able to tell banks in their face that the simple reason that NPLs are high does not fly, in as much as we admit that NPLs are high. Before you offer a loan, you have to do, through credit referencing to look at the risk profile of the client. If you are doing your work well as a bank, you should be able to help, reduce the cost of credit. I have a friend who works in one of the top 4 audit firms, and he tells me that a lot of the NPLs that we record in Ghana, some of them, even at the time that we were issuing the loans, you could tell that this loan, it is going to go bad. So I believe that the banks have to also do very well in terms of the kind of credit analysis they do for us to reduce the component of NPLs we have on our books.
Well, if you just join us, we're having a conversation about the budget presentation tomorrow by the Finance Minister. We are trying to understand the direction, the possibilities that are available for the Finance Minister in terms of revenue generation, in terms of expenditure, in terms of reviving the economy and then sustaining the economy as well. And so your thoughts are very important to us as we deliberate on these matters. And so we encourage you to join us via Facebook. Our handle is ETV Ghana. And you can share your thoughts with us even as we try to understand these things. So I will take us to a very important part of this conversation, which has to do with the announcement of the Ghana Care project, where some 100 billion is supposed to be available to bolster the economy. We are also talking about the 170 euros EIB facility, which is supposed to set up the development bank.
Yeah.
How would that situate in the context?
Fantastic. The banking sector in any economy is like the lifeline of the economy. Access to credit is very important. We have undergone a lot of banking sector reforms. I remember in 2003, and even the recent one we started in 2017, September. Banks are supposed to provide credit to the market and affordable credit like that. But what we have seen is that with all the cleanup exercises and the reforms we have done in the banking sector, we still have not gotten to a point that banks will lend long-term credit which are very cheap to the ordinary businesses and then even to individuals. Hence the need for a development bank. A development bank is like a development finance institution. The objectives of the bank is to provide some long-term capital because money should have time to breathe and for us to grow. And what we have seen is that the lending rate we are charging and the maturity on our loan are too short-term. And so if I want to go into infrastructure, or I want to go into agri, or if I want to go into investment in small, micro, medium enterprises, and the time given for my loan is so short, at the same time, it is expensive, then I will not be able to get the needed revenue. Hence, the government set up to establish what we call the Development Bank Ghana. We're expecting that the bank will be launched. But as I speak to you now, there have been 3 investments to capitalize the bank. Number 1 is from the World Bank. The World Bank has already given $250 million, followed by EIB, as you mentioned, 170 million euros. And just about 3 days ago, the African Development Bank also gave a grant of 40 million. It's supposed to be a wholesale bank. And let me hasten to add, DBG should be complementary but not competitive to the banking industry. For development finance institution to play an effective role in the economy, it should not compete with the existing financial institution, but it should be complementary. I've done a work that is going to be shared in December, on 2nd December, on DBG, and I'm going to invite the media, everybody I'm going to share from different perspective of why it is important for us to have a Development Bank Ghana, and more importantly, the corporate governance principles of such a bank, because we have a history. We have government banks that are not doing well because of corporate governance issue, and we don't want to mention names of banks here, but more importantly, from learning from best practices all over the world, how should the DBG approach financing in the country so that we'll be able to generate the needed advantages of a development bank in a country.
Well, the recent transition of the NBSSI to the Ghana Enterprises Agency.
Yeah.
My thinking, though, since the NBI or NBSSI or the agency now has a backbone in terms of database, in terms of customers, would it not have been appropriate using that medium to channel these resources to these businesses?
That is one sector. And so the DBG will be expected to do a wholesale financing. So the DBG will not go to Mokola to give out loans to people like that, but the DBG is supposed to give wholesale financing to an agency like the Ghana Enterprises Agency, or maybe Maslock, or maybe, so that it is not expected to be going there to do the work itself, but to give wholesale financing that is very cheap and is very affordable to the business community.
But the issue then has to do with, for instance, if the development bank is giving out facilities at an interest rate to, let's say, an agency at a rate of, let's say, 5%. Okay. Now, that agency takes it, goes to its customers, and is charging, let's say, 15%.
That would be huge. It would be huge.
No, so then we need to understand the mechanics.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned that it should not be competitive, but complementary. If the current lending rate that maybe Ghana Enterprises Agency will give a loan is, let's say, 10%, the DBG should be able to, because of the source of funds that it has and it has control over, should be able to give credit less than that, so that whatever they would add to it will just be maybe administrative or some cost, but it's not for them to make some outrageous profit. But
who ensures that the borrowing agencies comply within a certain threshold of interest rates?
That is why the relationships are very important. And so in Ghana's banking sector, this is the picture we envisage. From the top, you have the Bank of Ghana, which is supposed to regulate. And then we have at present, we have the banks, we have non-banks, microfinance institutions. But we envisage that DBG is going to come in the middle between the Bank of Ghana and then the banks, non-banks, and then savings and loans. So that it's supposed to be a wholesale bank. They will be able to support, if it's infrastructure development, if it is agri financing, if it is in micro, small, medium enterprises, they will be able to support that in wholesale financing. And the big thing is the cost of the financing and the duration of the financing. Because if I cannot get capital in, for the capital to, grow by itself, then I will not be able to, generate the needed revenue as a corporation. But the DBG is supposed to give long-term capital, like 20 years, like 30 years, so that money will be given the opportunity to grow. What we see now is people are going for loans that the tenor of the loan is so short and the cost of credit is also high. At the end of the day, they make nothing. They work for, and their profit is for the bank. And that is why at present, Ghana's, condition and our need for financing, we need long-term financing to embark on either infrastructure development, either on SME financing, or agric, or any other sector that we think that we need long-term financing.
Somebody would say, but haven't we been down this path before, where we talk about industry-focused or industry-targeted, banks?
Yeah.
And then in the long run, they turn out to be doing the same commercial banking as everyone else.
And we have examples.
Exactly.
Yes, we have examples, but how did we arrive at that? And that is fundamental in solving the problems that we envisage that the development bank Ghana will face, so that they will not veer from their core mandate. Why was ADB established? Why was NIB established? They were supposed to address specific needs. But you know that in 2003, we did banking sector reform. And for me, I've done some work in the past whereby the universal banking license regime, we should be able to assess it since 2003 and to ask ourselves that, has it really held? Because it looks like the banks are doing virtually the same thing. And even banks that were established for certain purposes, they have veered off from their main objectives, and they are also offering short-term credit to people. And then the profit margins are also huge. And at the end of the day, the purpose for the establishment of those financial institutions is not realized. So I believe that those are some of the reasons we have put in the paper, so that going forward we'll be able to caution. DBG is not also coming to into the financial sector and do the same things that we have done. Banks are established, or specialized banks are established for specific reasons, and so they should be able to address specific needs.
There's a question about revenue, because you made the point about how year on we have missed our revenue targets.
Yeah.
And so we're asking ourselves, should the government be looking internally to raise revenue? Can the government look externally to raise revenue? If it's looking internally, how?
Thank you. In any ways, whether internally or externally, has advantages and disadvantages. When you want to look internally in terms of revenue mobilization, I'm not saying that the government should introduce any new taxes. We have a lot. In 2021, the government introduced about 4 new taxes, and so it's not about taxes. And we should also bear it in mind that in 2017, this government scrapped about 17 taxes to move the economy from taxation to production. And the evidence is there. After scrapping those nuisance taxes, Ghana's economy, from 3.5 GDP growth, it grew about 8% in the following year, in 2017. And so it's not about introduction of new taxes, but it's about widening the base. That is, if you're able to get it well, we'll be able to generate a lot of revenue. Now, how do we use digital means to generate a lot of revenue? If you look at people paying taxes, less than 3 million, but potential about 12 million people. Now we have been able to register about 15.7 million with Ghana cards. How do we translate that number into potential taxpayers? Even if 12 million people are active workers engaged in many economic activity, how can we get everybody to contribute their quota? That is very important. In terms of the other part of the domestic revenue, in terms of borrowing, I think that the domestic debt component of our, of our public debt is also rising, and rising very fast. I believe that government, and it's one of the reasons why interest rate is not going down as expected. So government should also tread cautiously. On the external front, what we have seen since 2007, that we issued our first Euro bond worth $750 million. We have been going to the market almost every year. This year, beginning of the year, we issued $3.025 billion. Government has indicated that in 2020, they are going to also issue another Eurobond. And it's huge. And these are commercial loans. It's very expensive. And that is what we have seen dominating our, our fiscal policy, for some time now. Why do countries borrow? They borrow because they are not raising a lot of revenue, but the expenditure is going up. How do we rationalize our expenditure and also raise our revenue so that we'll be able to cut down on borrowing? For the first time in many years, this year's budget, the allocation for interest rate exceeded all allocations in terms of the lines.
True.
Interest payments, we allocated to spend 35 billion Ghana cedis. Compensation to government employees, 30 billion. Goods and services, capital expenditure was around 11 billion. But this is a worrying trend. If you are spending a lot of money that you could have used for Agenda 111 or whatever infrastructure project you want to embark on, in amortizing your debt, then it is troubling. That is why some of us, we think that, first of all, let's even start auditing the kind of debt we had in the past and look at how best we can have quality debt. Quality debt, instead, there should be value for money. Well, if I'm going for the money, it should not be spent on recurrent expenditure, but it should be capital expenditure so that at the time of amortization, I will be able to pay the debt. And so it's a worrying trend. And in my article on the expectations for the 2022 budget, I said that we should not sacrifice Ghana's medium-term prospect on the altar of public debt and its accompanying interest payments. And I believe that we should be able to get it right. Otherwise, interest payments ballooning. Tomorrow, I envisage that it might still be the top item with allocation at the expense of the other, items. And so for me, I believe that we should look at how best we change the narrative. The narrative, if we want to change it, cut down unnecessary expenditure, and on the revenue side, be able to generate a lot of domestic revenue.
We'll take a short breather, and when we are back, two things in our minds. So if there are no jobs in the public sector, and we're being encouraged to go into entrepreneurship, what expectations do we have in terms of incentivizing the youth to go into entrepreneurship? Two, the fears of going into HIPIC. Is it likely? Is it real? Are we at the tipping point? We'll take a breather. When we come back, these two things on our minds. And you're welcome back to Fact Sheet live on ETV, live on NISIM 95.9 and 100.1. So there were two questions that I said we were going to attempt to answer before we go for the break. So government says public sector choked.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship is the path to go.
Yeah.
What do you expect the government to focus on in the budget to ensure it creates avenues for young folks like us to become entrepreneurs?
Fantastic. Let me reiterate that it's not everybody who is born to be an entrepreneur. Some are born to be employers, and some are born to be employees. In any ways, whether an employer or an employee in an economy, the system has to, be good to favor you. What we have seen is that government payroll has about 600,000, employees. And if you look at the working population of Ghana, it's even in excess of 12 million. And so that is a small chunk. In as much as government says that the public sector is choked, I believe that if you are doing proper auditing of some public sector workers, I think we can still put some young people in public sector. And let me also hasten to add that there are some jobs that it cannot be left to the private sector. The private sector cannot recruit for police or military or immigration. It has to be the function of government. And so I believe that public sector, we can still do things to put people there. But for people who go into, entrepreneurship, there should be an enabling environment, i.e. starting from the cost of credit people have to create their businesses. And we live in a global world whereby competition is keen. And as of now, we also trading in the African Continental Free Trade Area with a market size of 1.2 billion people. We are exchanging goods amongst ourselves. How will Ghanaian companies or entrepreneurs be competitive? They should have they should have low, the cost of credit should be low in the economy. And that is very key. And in the 2021 budget, government, hinted of establishing a youth bank, even though I've not seen the policy document for the youth bank. But in my mind, it's supposed to be a credit-giving institution, less than giving interest rate. I've heard from some courtesies from government spokespersons, less than 10%. If you have a good idea as a young person, you can access that loan. I think it's a step in the right direction. NEIP has started, they've done that in the past, and these are measurable things that they have done that, it should be encouraged. Once we have a youth bank, it's not about government money, it's freebie, but I believe that we should be able to give people the money to create sustainable businesses. People have ideas, they need funding. These are the areas that we should be able to look at so that people can go into entrepreneurship.
Final one, two, we'll try and box it within just 2 minutes. It has to do with concerns about worrying debt portfolio and the possibility of Ghana going HIPIC again.
Yeah.
Are we there yet with the debt to GDP hovering around 77.1 or 77.2?
Yeah. No, I must put it on record that it's not HIPIC. But Ghana is in the category of high debt distress. And so we are stretched. That is what it means. The HIPIC was an initiative instituted by the World Bank, the IMF, and other multilateral agencies in 1996 to forgive debt of certain countries so that they will be able to get the fiscal space to embark on development. Ghana, we went on HIPIC in 2002. We came back in 2000, and the program ended in 2004. So I don't know where the publication is coming from, whether I have seen the World Bank article. It is saying that these countries have benefited from HIPIC before. And Ghana, our start date was in 2002, and our completion date was in 2004. But the fact is, public debt in Ghana is so huge, and Ghana is classified as high debt distress country. I was in a launch of a report by the African Development Bank just last week, and that report also, speaks to the same fact that Ghana is classified as a debt distress country, and that is what we should be able to look at, how best we move away from this high level of debt so that we don't pump a lot of money, amortizing interest at the expense of going into real sectors of the economy.
Quick one, under a minute. The recent, release from the GRA about the benchmark and, the discounts that we used to enjoy, kicking in 15th, 30% and 50%. Now, it says, revised selected items as from 15th of November 2021 cease to enjoy 30% and 50% discount on the benchmark values or invoices for vehicle and general goods, respectively.
Yeah.
Is this an indication of where government is likely to go?
Well, the GIA has issued a statement that this is not true.
That this is not true?
That this is not true.
Okay.
But where
it's their letterhead.
that they are not going to review it. That's what they have said. Some of these things is also to test the pulse of the people. And so once such issues come, publications come out, we want to test whether we should review such a policy. This was implemented in April 2019. And government's mind was that our port is not competitive. One of the reasons is that we are charging so much on import. Hence, let's do 50% reduction in general goods and 30% on vehicles. But you see, in a country, you also want to encourage industrialization. People are importing the same good, and they are competing with those who have produced in Ghana. I read an article by oil palm producers. Now, before the benchmark was introduced, imported oil, like the one in the yellow gallon,
Yeah.
was selling around 100, and according to their report, 150 Ghana cedis, and that one the ones produced in Ghana was around 141. Because of the benchmark reduction of 50%, it is the imported oil is less expensive as compared to the ones produced here, which is making their businesses uncompetitive. And so I believe that it's about time that government would have to look at the pros and cons of such a policy. In fact, the import levies were so high, and our ports were not competitive as compared to the ports of Lomé or Abidjan. But we are in a competition. But in implementing such a policy, we've been doing this for the past 2 years. I think government should be able to review, and let's look at the pros and cons. If I'm having benchmark valuation, a reduction of 50%, what is its impact on industrialization? And then the opposite, we also look at, so that at the end of the day, in implementing such a policy, government will be able to achieve the objectives of industrialization. At the same time, import levies will also be able to come down.
My brother, I will thank you for making time to join us tonight.
Thank you very much.
For tonight's edition of Fact Sheet.
Yeah,
And I must say it's been a very exciting conversation, trying to break down the very many jargons you, the financial analyst and economist, throw at us all the time when we are having conversations with you. I'm grateful.
Thank you very much for having me, Sammy.
All right. So my guest tonight has been Mr. Emmanuel Amuadakwa, who is an economist.
CCAD.
And partner at CCAD Global.
Yeah.
Maybe as a result of the entrepreneurship, he may employ me and give me a job so that I may earn some extra income somewhere.
That is our new consultancy firm in the area of economic advisory, tax, and then also in petroleum and energy advisory services.
Okay. Well, I think my economist is good. Small.
Yeah, so you pick you on as a partner.
All right, on that note, we'll end here. Girl Vibes is up next, but you can catch a repeat broadcast of the show, God willing, tomorrow at 10. We shall be discussing the budget as well, God willing, tomorrow on the Happy Morning Show at 5:30, and then in the afternoon between 1 and 5, Epanhuadaben would also be focusing a lot more energy and attention on the budget. By that time, the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta, is done with a presentation. My name is Samuel Ishen. I wish you a beautiful night.